While I was doing research for the Spyro and Cinder video, I began to realize that dragons, similar to knights, just seem to be littered everywhere throughout the Skylanders setting. And I don't mean just Skylanders. They are literally everywhere. Go to every game in this franchise and I will bet that there is a dragon alluded to, part of the roster, or a mention somewhere. Some dragons even showing up in the games themselves and being major parts of the narrative. And the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Dragons, like elves, have been part of the cultural zeitgeist for a long time, and like elves, they've been overused to death. But I'm not really complaining that much, since you need to just be a lizard that flies to be considered one, and lots of franchises at least try to do something creative with them. But today, we're going to talk about some of the many dragons within Skylanders. So buckle up, dear viewers, and let's jump straight into this.
Blink and destroy.
Now, when it comes to Dragon Skylanders, Drobot is a really interesting case, because not only does he have a lot of lore, but it seems like he's the only dragon part of the tech element. But considering his backstory, it makes a lot of sense. When Drobot was younger, he always felt like the odd one out in his species. While most of his friends were laser focused on dragon things like flying and fighting, Drobot spent a lot of his time studying gadgets and other pieces of technology. One day, however, he was caught in a tailwind, and since he wasn't really that good with flying, he crash-landed on a desert island. But to the dragon's surprise, the island was covered in multiple different machines and gadgets. The second he realized this, he decided then and there that the island was going to be his workshop, and after some time, he built a robotic flying suit with built-in voice synthesizer, eyes that fire laser beams, and wings that can shoot spinning gears at lightning speeds. He would become a master of sparring with his opponents in the sky, but once his humble homeland began to feel small, he would leave and seek out Eon to become a Skylander, which he would eventually become. From here on out, he has two appearances, the Dragon King, which is pretty much a given for every Skylander at this point, and a story called Lightning Rod Faces the Cyclops Queen. So let's talk about his involvement. Drobot was one of the few Skylanders who participated in something called the Storm Titan games, along with Lightning Rod. But just as the event was about to start, Lightning Rod's hammer accidentally flew out of his hands and into Flynn's air balloon. But luckily, Drobot was able to save him along with Hugo, Double Trouble, and Squirm Grub, an original character for the book. But after that, they are sent on a quest to find the last living land well, that, according to the book, is the form of the air fragment of something called the Mask of Power. It's a comic book, just go with it. On the way to the land well, Drobot has to supercharge his afterburners just to get there before Chaos does, because he's also gunning for the parts of the mask, despite his afterburners malfunctioning. When they get there, he, Lightning Rod, and Pop Fizz make their way into the city, only for Drobot and Lightning Rod to get captured by the Queen and thrown into the cage with the Landwell, who immediately hypnotizes Lightning Rod and tries to eat him, but luckily Drobot was able to get them out of there. The story then gets a bit fuzzy from here, but from what I can tell, Chaos and his forces began to fight against the Queen and hers. Lightning Rod throws the whale because apparently the air fragment of the mask was actually a tower, and they managed to claim the masterpiece before leaving. Now, before we go, I like to point out that Drobot is one of the rare Skylanders to actively go seek out Master Eon to become a Skylander. Most of the time he invites you or it just ends up happening, but Drobot actively went out to become one. I guess he just wanted all the smoke because he was just that bored. But with that out the way, let's get on to the next Skylander.
Twists of Fury!
Now, when it comes to Skylanders before Imaginators, they were pretty detached from the games. You just play as them and they don't really have an effect on what's going on an individual level. But from what I understand, Whirlwind seems to be one of the rare Skylanders that have a large effect on the game you're playing. Born of both Unicorn and Dragon descent, Whirlwind felt like an oddball most of her life, not being helped by the other species around her. The dragons didn't like the fact that she had a horn on her head, and the unicorns didn't like her wings in the slightest. Because of the constant judgment she received from those around her, she retreated into the storm clouds to be alone, where she would learn how to control lightning and storms. So when a group of trolls came to her home and planned to take dragon scales and unicorn horns, she shot out of the clouds and unleashed a blinding rainbow that scared the trolls so bad that they immediately fled the area. After this, the unicorns and dragons of her town saw her as a ray of light, which is a switch up that I haven't seen that fast in my life, but anyways, Eon would find out about her heroic acts and good heart before eventually recruiting her into the Skylanders. Now, if you are an avid Skylanders fan, you would know that she actually makes an appearance in Swap Force, but not in the traditional way most other characters would. In Winter Keep, there's a statue of her that is pretty important throughout most of the level and the search for the Frost Hound, and according to my research, a few years after joining the Skylanders, and surprisingly, recruiting Warnado, she would help the Frost Elves of Winter Keep, who were cursed by eternal midnight, by enchanting a crystal horn called the Illuminator, that not only illuminated the area around them, but gave the Frost Elves courage whenever they needed it. And that's pretty much where her story comes to a close lore-wise, except for that one storyline that I am getting sick of mentioning. Now, the thing that confuses me the most about this is, if unicorns and dragons don't see hybrids in a positive light, then why would they be able to, you know, mix? If you were all able to coexist, then why was the hybrid child where you drew the line? And speaking of which, where were her parents during all of this? If I were her parents, I would have seen the writing on the wall and just moved. This town was like one butterfly away from creating a new villain. But with that out the way, let's get on to the next Skylander of today.
Root punch.
Now, out of all the dragons I've covered on the channel, I think that Camo is one of the strangest just based on his backstory alone. At first, I didn't even think he was a dragon to the point that I had to look at the wiki to confirm it, but apparently he is, so let's get to work. Camo's life began after he hatched from the roots of the Tree of Life, which somehow made him half plant, half dragon. Because of this, Camo had access to powers that allowed him to grow fruits and vegetables at highly accelerated rates. Don't think that Camo's the solution to world hunger, however, because the fruits and vegetables immediately explode after ripening. Camo's gift eventually caught the eye of Master Eon, initially because he was hungry at the time, so he tried to eat one of Camo's watermelons only for it to explode in his face. This caused Eon to realize that Camo had far more potential than he originally thought and managed to convince Camo to protect the world as a Skylander. Now, you may think that this is a random backstory, but what was written at the end actually intrigues me a lot. Most Skylanders just join after Master Eon asks them to, but this is the first time on the channel where a Skylander had to be convinced by Master Eon to join. This just makes me question whether there are people out there who were offered to be a Skylander that just outright refused or retired. But with that out the way, let's get to the last Skylander of today. Now, when it comes to everyone we've seen up to this point, they have had some sort of hardship in their life. So after reading Zap's background, I realized that he's the luckiest because things could have been far worse for him. Zap was born to a royal family of water dragons, but after his birth, a riptide washed him out to sea. But luckily, he was found and adopted by a school of electric eels. Growing up with the eels, he pretty much excelled at everything, and even created a special harness that allowed him to carry an endless electric charge and shock things at great distances. Zap was also a gifted racer, winning races against every opponent he came across. Except for dolphins, who would usually challenge him to races only to be shocked by electric current just to remind them who they were dealing with. Despite his troublesome youth, Zap grew up to be a protector of Skylands, and he would make an appearance in Gilgrum vs. the Fishmaster, trigger Happy Target's The Evil Chaos, and Ripped into Overdrive, where he's part of Washbuckler's team that protect the Academy from Chaos's Armada. But that's pretty much where he stopped showing up in the lore. Now, with that out the way, I like to point out that nowhere in his lore does it explain how he joined the Skylanders, and I wasn't able to find anything that says if he ever figured out if he was royalty or not, which kinda sucks for him, but for us, this is our stopping point. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, share this around so I can grow as a channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, and once again, I will see you all in the next one.